On3 happened. Texas went into Tuscaloosa. And Jesse Simonton, the Longhorns looked like the more physically dominant team. They looked like they had the better quarterback. And they came out of there with a 10-point win. 34-24 Texas. We want to start with the Longhorns or we start with the Crimson Tide? Because this is a big one. Big one.
Let's be fair. Let's start with Texas. I mean,
all right, they earned it.
They earned it. That they, the jokes were there when Sark went for that fourth down. They don't get it, and Alabama immediately marches down and scores the touchdown. The jokes were right. Like the writing was on the wall. Texas is self imploding again. This is Steve Sarkeesian, what he's done at Washington, what he's done at USC, now at Texas. He can't win these close games. And yet his team was the team that was more battle-tested, it seemed. They showed more mettle. And damn, Andy, I mean, I think we walk away from this. That was a doozy of a game. It became a haymaker with both teams just throwing fists at each other. But I think we walk away with this, with two truisms. Texas is a legitimate college football playoff contender in 2023.
Yep.
And Alabama still has real uncertainty at quarterback. But let's talk the Longhorns.
Let us talk the Longhorns, because you mentioned the getting stopped on fourth down, Alabama scoring, taking the lead 16-13 on that 49-yard pass from Milroe to Jermaine Burton. And it was a great play design. They got him matched up against the safety. It was beautiful. It felt like everything was turning. A.D. Mitchell was in the end zone
3 plays later.
Yeah. 1 minute and 9 seconds later. It was unbelievable how quickly Texas answered. And when you looked at it on the whole, especially those two touchdown drives and what happened between there was a lot of, you know what? Texas has the better roster here, or at least it feels that way.
You're leading me to my point. You know what? Your former co-host Ari Wasserman loves to tout stars matter. This was Texas's statement that stars matter, because their stars played better than Alabama's stars. They had their 5 stars, their 5-star freshmen on defense, giving Alabama's 5-star freshman offensive tackle on offense, hell on wheels. They had their 5-star quarterback, Quinn Ewers, responding to kind of a sluggish, first half, and then just throwing bombs in the second half. I think Chris Fowler noted they had 5 plays over 30 yards alone against Nick Saban, in this Tide defense. And I thought, frankly, and where I believe I was most wrong, Andy, about this game, I thought at its baseline, even though I really like Texas's offensive line, I like Kelvin Banks, I like the fact that they returned 5 guys, 5 returning starters. That group so thoroughly outplayed Alabama's offensive line. Alabama got punked up front. Milroe was running for his life. And other than that one drive when they ran the ball 7 straight times, they really couldn't run the football.
Right.
And so, I mean, yeah, you kind of shrugging your shoulders like they were the less physical team.
Ethan Burke, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, Alfred Collins, those guys were all over the place. And then Anthony Hill,
the freshman,
they were playing him similar to the way LSU played Harold Perkins last year, where a little see ball, get ball kind of thing, line him up on the edge, let him see what he can. By the way, he beat both of Alabama's offensive tackles for quarterback hits. I can't remember if he got sacks off both of them, but he definitely got a sack off one of them and hit the quarterback after beating both of them. It was crazy up front. Burke had a great night. Caden Proctor, there was the one play where he was holding Burke and basically held him into the sack. And the ref threw a flag and picked it up, and it was like, that was bad enough as it was, and they just picked up the flag. But, yeah, it was – now, part of the Alabama blocking thing, I do wonder if some of that is Milroe, though. There were some plays where Milroe is moving around in what could have been a clean pocket and walking into guys that are trying to sack him. And he was always, rarely did he catch the ball and just throw. He was almost always moving around, sometimes before he needed to. And I mean, crippling interceptions, 2 of those. I don't know what they do there, because it's weird how the quarterback situation with Alabama went for me on Saturday, because at one point, Jesse, I was going to come on here if Alabama won the game, or if the game continued in the way it was going kind of through the first half, I was going to read each starting quarterback stats and ask you to guess which one was Quinn Ewers and which one was Jalen Milroe, because there was a point when they were tracking very similarly. But later, I was going to ask you, is Jalen Milroe a slightly better Jeff Sims? Because that's what it felt like, the Nebraska quarterback who kept turning the ball over and giving Colorado points earlier today.
Well, we touched on this very, very briefly because it was a blowout and yada, yada, yada. But like the Kyle McCord, Devin Brown deal at Ohio State, that's clearly wasn't really a competition. Kyle McCord's gotten the lion's share of reps there. I don't know about you, but it sure seems like the whole narrative that this was a 3-way deal and they really wanted Ty Simpson to be the guy, and you bring in Tyler Buckner. The fact that Saban never even went to one of those guys when Milroe did throw a pair of those crippling interceptions, was bailing from the pocket. Tommy Rees dials up that perfect wheel route play call, and Milroe overthrows it by 3 or 5 yards. It's just surprising that they never went to another guy, because Saban has done that historically other times in the past. And then this was a historical loss. This is the first time, Alabama loses a non-conference game during the regular season under Saban since his year 1.
Here's another question. You can just laugh when I ask you, because there's no real debate over it. Who are you taking in terms of skill position weapons, Texas or Alabama? Like, it's not even close. It's Texas. No. JT Sanders, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell. I mean, Whittington had a really nice catch tonight in a key moment. Like, they were so much better than their Alabama counterparts.
What, that, and I'm also like, and this is just, I'm just looking at the box score now. What? Justice Haynes can't get on the field for Alabama. You can't run the ball, and you're not playing your 5-star running back.
I will raise my hand and hazard a guess. They want him to be able to pick up pass pro stuff. Like that's what kept Dalvin Cook off the field for 5 games before he blew up as a freshman.
Well, when you're averaging 3 yards a carry, I'm going to tell you, Andy. I maybe throw somebody else out there that can at least tote the rock a little bit, because because to your point, they don't have the receivers on the perimeter, and the running back group, the rest of the running back group just wasn't there. So this was a statement. I mean, the fact that Texas was tested time and again in this game, and they always had a response when that was the bugaboo for Steve Sarkeesian and this team, especially a year ago. And for them to waltz out of here and say, hey, we went not only toe-to-toe with the Tide, but we bullied the Tide in the second half. We took down, the big bad bully that is Nick Saban. And yeah, we're here for it. Texas is, this may be that we're going to have a fight off between Texas's back and the return of the U this week. That's going to be like the two fan bases that are going to say, raise the flag of which is back more. I think Texas, as impressive as Miami was, Texas looks like they're one of the best, 1, 2, 3, 4 teams in the country.
So you have to predict what the AP poll voters will do. This is not your rankings. This is you trying to guess what the voters will do. What are we thinking for Texas? 3, 4? So right behind Georgia, Michigan, and who else?
So I'm slotting, teaser for tomorrow's column on 3. Go check that out. I am slotting them at 4. AP voters. You were once an AP voter. I have been a different voter, but not in the AP. I know that they tend to really like flashy quarterbacks and blue blood brands. And when a flashy quarterback has a huge game and a blue blood brand makes a huge upset win, that equals a top 4 ranking to me. So I have them right behind Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State, number 4.
That's probably where the voters will slot them. when I voted, I was one of those. Once the season starts, I'm ranking based on what we've seen this season. So I might have Texas 1 at this point, like because Michigan hasn't had a chance to show us where they should be. Neither is Georgia. But at this point, you might put Texas 1, Florida State 2, based on those wins and how impressive we thought they were. Duke would be up there too, by the way. So
yeah,
it's just two different ways to do it. You're going to arrive at the same place anyway. But I do think that the ones who vote conventionally are going to put Texas in the top 4. Cole Satterfield, geez, I can't believe we're saying Texas in the top 4. Why can't you believe that?
We have 2 data points, and they probably have the best win, if not the second best win, after Florida State on the entire season. Again, you go into Alabama as a 7-point dog.
Well, hold on. Our guy Matt has a comment. What if, and listen to me here, neither Bama or Texas are actually great? It looked like a couple of 9-3 or 10-2 teams, undisciplined, sloppy, bad side. Matt believes the only good team is Georgia. So Matt's a Georgia fan, and it's okay. He can say that now. Like right now, they've got scoreboard over everybody, so he can say that. But trust me, there are other good teams besides Georgia. They might not be as good as Georgia, but there are other good teams. I promise.
Andy, red alert, SEC. What is the SEC meh? Between LSU, Florida State, South Carolina, North Carolina, Utah, Florida, this performance to date in 2 weeks now, the SEC has one marquee non-conference win, and that's Ole Miss beating a backup quarterback against a ranked Tulane team. That is also the only ranked win that the entire conference has the entire season so far. Danny Cannell right now is just going crazy.
Oh, he's just rolling it. He's like a pig in slop. So somebody on Twitter pointed this out to me, and I think it's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but not a complete exaggeration. And Matt, by the way, in the chat just said that's not true. Georgia's got problems too. And yes, I know all the Georgia fans were really mad in the first quarter when they weren't scoring on Ball State. So, but this was pointed out to me on Twitter, and I found it very interesting. It is an exaggeration, but not a complete one. We're talking about the playoff expanding to 12 teams. Maybe that would help parity, but perhaps NIL and the transfer portal have hastened parity even more. And I don't mean everybody's equal and that suddenly Arizona State's as good as Texas. What I mean is Alabama cannot have a huge prohibitive talent advantage that it used to have. Now a team like Texas can have similar talent, and in this case, maybe better talent than Alabama. Georgia, they're the ones with the most talent right now, but could say a Texas go toe-to-toe with Georgia? What we saw tonight suggests they could.
Well, this, you know what, Andy, and it's a great, I think, shooting off point too. We'll find out by the end of the year, I think, of how NIL and everything has kind of maybe evened the playing field, so to speak. But I think this also speaks to the fact of there is a little bit of a flaw into if you just explicitly lean on the stars matter or like the blue chip ratio or those sorts of metrics, because they don't technically, they can't, because you can't regrade all these transfers, and then you have to regrade all these transfers over and over. And so it doesn't take into account a Florida State getting a Keon Coleman who's better than his high school recruiting ranking, or a Jordan Verse.
Keon Coleman might be better than every receiver in the country.
Right.
Now.
Or a Jordan Verse who was a standout at Albany as an FBS, no name, whatever star, and now looks like a 5-star. Well, Texas, it doesn't take into account that, you just get to slide in AD Mitchell. This is just, he's suddenly, if he's not wide receiver 1, he's wide receiver 1B, and he toasted, a couple Alabama DBs tonight, including Kool-Aid McKinstry, and boom, like that is part of the difference in this margin that you see.
Well, and also Texas develops better than Texas did before. Texas was not developing players for a long time. The tail end of the Mac Brown era, the Charlie Strong era, the Tom Herman era, they were not producing NFL players. They were not producing players the NFL wanted. They absolutely are doing that now. You saw it with Bijan last year as a first-round pick. you're going to see a lot of these Texas players drafted. Maybe not all, not like super high first rounders, but you're going to see like second, third, fourth round guys. And it's going to be a situation where they have, close to, they'll have double digit type guys, maybe not double digit guys drafted, but a significant number of guys drafted and more young guys that will be drafted, that we know will be drafted. That has not been the case. So the talent out piece of it is you have to add that to the Stars Matter part of it. And that's where Texas is different, because Texas always brought in highly ranked recruits. They're actually doing something with them now. And that matters, because Alabama does something with its highly ranked recruits. Georgia develops its highly ranked and its less highly ranked, your Jordan Davises and your Ladd McConkeys. They develop them better than anyone. So that's the part that matters too. I think Michigan right now has closed the gap on Ohio State, because Ohio State still brings in better upfront talent. But if we look at what they're pushing out at the end of this year, I don't think they look that different.
No, they don't. And I would say my lasting thoughts on this game, Andy, would be I think there's two major points that I would also walk away with from the Texas point of view. One is that what always was doesn't have to always be, which is that the narrative that they're going to continue to jump on the rake and hit themselves and fall on their face in these close games. Yeah. Exactly. The idea that just because they haven't, that they can't, isn't true. That they blew up that narrative tonight. And the other narrative, I think, that is something that I think will become a bigger deal moving forward, is that this is the proof of concept that Steve Sarkeesian has been preaching in Austin, that has now maybe come to its fruition. That is that what he learned from Alabama, and then you take those lessons and you say, all right, I'm going to add that with a Bo Davis. I'm going to add that with a Jeff Banks. And I'm going to
guys who used to work at Alabama. Yes.
Guys who used to work at Alabama. And I'm going to recruit and, to what you said, develop this talent and turn this into an SEC type program even before Texas had joined the SEC. Tonight was a culmination of I think that coming true.
Yeah, it certainly was. Before we leave this game, one more question. If you're Nick Saban, you're going to play USF in Tampa next week. Then the SEC starts. You're gonna look at the quarterback situation? You're gonna throw the competition open? You're gonna just try somebody else as a starter?
I mean, I don't know how you don't, but I think what I would say from this game is that they clearly don't seem to have a lot of faith or trust in the guys behind Jalen Milroe, or else you would have thought one of them would have gotten a shot.
No, and you look at the Middle Tennessee State game, that they were not
42-0 before Buckner came
right.
in.
It was not an open competition. It was, this is the guy, and we're going to get our backup some reps at the end of it. So they got to figure out, is that your guy? Just it's the same question that we were asking after Nebraska, Colorado.
Yeah.
About Jeff Sims. Is that your guy? Are you sure that's your guy? Because you got to figure that out, and you're gonna either make a change or you're gonna ride with him, and we'll see what happens. But let's talk about some of these other games. Oregon Texas Tech was a banger. It was back and forth, crazy. And I feel so bad for everybody who had Texas Tech plus 6.5, because when Oregon kicks that field goal, you are assuming you have cashed your ticket. Oh, Jesse, I'm sorry.
Bad beat alert here. Bad beat alert. I had a very good day today overall. I had Rice. Oh, shout out to the Owls.
That's right.
That down. I had that
Mike
on the money line and with the points. So that was JT Daniels came home for me with that one. But the back-breaking touchdown that Tyler threw in the Oregon game, that was that
Tyler
was
Shook, former Duck, throwing a touchdown to a current Duck. That was the problem. Texas Tech trying to come back, and there's a pick six at the end of the game. But this was, Bo Nix very calmly got them down the field to kick, which, should have been the game-winning field goal. And then, of course, they had the pick six to really put the nail in there. But Yeah, I thought Texas Tech played really well coming off of that loss at Wyoming. They showed, that the hype surrounding them was not lost. Like it wasn't completely wrong. I still think they could be good in the Big 12. I'm not giving up on them yet. I thought they played a very good game against Oregon tonight. It's just Oregon's better.
Well, they were also down 18-13 in this game and then stormed, back 20. I think they were up 27-18. Then Oregon comes back. There was a little bit, it was a tough call either way. Bo Nix threw what looked like was going to be a horrible interception in the end zone that was ended up ruled. The Texas Tech defender couldn't get his foot in bound. So Oregon was able to kick a field goal that put them up, that allowed them to basically keep Texas Tech at arm's length there, a little bit. But fun game, big win for the Ducks to kind of remain undefeated. They had this one kind of circled as a trap affair, so to speak, because they have a gauntlet of a Pac-12 schedule coming up. And that game in 2 weeks, we teased it earlier, but that game in 2 weeks against Colorado is going to be insane, especially when you frame it around the comments that Dan Lanning made about Colorado.
That seemed like nothing at the time.
Yeah.
But it's
a couple of weeks ago, he's out there, throwing all sorts of shade on the Buffs, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, you may be rolling in with two top 15-ish teams on the slate. So
cannot wait. Mississippi State and Arizona, the Pac-12 has lost a game. The first loss of the year for the Pac-12 was an overtime loss in Starkville by Arizona. They actually went down 2 touchdowns, came back, had a chance to win this game. Jaden Delore gets stopped a couple inches shy of the 15-yard line on 4th and long, and that was the end of that. But that was a fun one too. I mean, because it looked like Mississippi State was going to roll because there were some early turnovers by Arizona that they capitalized on. But then Arizona fought back and a great game. So unfortunately for the Pac-12, they lose that one. But Arizona is not actually a Pac-12 school. That's a Big 12 school in waiting. There are 2 Pac-12 schools that are real Pac-12 schools. And one of them is Washington State. And they played Wisconsin on ABC, and they beat them 31-22. And the fans stormed the field. And Jake Dickert talked about how do you not love this? How do you not have us in your league? Jesse, my favorite thing that happened this week off the field was Wisconsin and Oregon State going to court to get a restraining order so that they can run the Pac-12. And by the way, so I've talked to some people about this, and you've seen it written about a little bit. They theoretically could have a 2-team conference if they wanted to, where their game would be the championship game. If they do that, they have to call it the 2-pack, right?
and then play with on a hologram field.
One can only hope. One can they should have the game against one another in Vegas. The Washington State Oregon State game should be in
all
Vegas
eyes
with
on
the Pac-12
me.
championships logos and everything.
And with just all eyes on me playing the intro music.
Oh, and
my favorite moment from this game was the end when Mark Jones, the ESPN announcer, was like, "I don't know how a network won't want this team."
Your network doesn't want that team.
I mean, it was just incredible.
But
it was a heck of a win, and this was my upset special of the week in my Friday pick 6 column. I rode with the Cougs, and they downed the Wisconsin just was super clunky offensively. They couldn't run the ball as well as obviously they did in week 1. Mordecai was getting hurt.
Sold out to stop the run. Wisconsin's not quite ready to win the game through the air yet. They were given the air if they wanted it, and they started to take it in the second half, but it took them a while.
Yeah, Mordecai was getting pressured a bunch. I mean, Washington State came up with some huge sacks. I know they had one big, what was that, like a sack fumble, or maybe a sack that turned into a very short touchdown. Wisconsin certainly crawled back in this game and made it quite interesting. And then Washington responded and scored a late touchdown and put it away. Huge win for Jake Dickert. Year two, I mean, they had an emphatic win in week one. Cam Ward looks so much better, in his second, season playing FBS competition. Still only average, I think, like 6.6 yards per throw tonight, but I think he scored like 4 total touchdowns. And he's an exciting player because he runs around back there like a little jackrabbit and just tries to throw either a deep ball or scamper for a first down. So fun upset. And that was going on while obviously Alabama and Oregon were playing their doozies, but it was still a fun third screen experience.
Well, and another game that was on the third screen for most of the night, but moved its way up there at the very end, Appalachian State, North Carolina. North Carolina survives. Now, that last play, like we said in some other games, it looked like it might have been pass interference, but the refs kept the flags in the pocket on the final play of double overtime, and North Carolina survives.
Well, and that game was all about the a year ago, Drake May went crazy in that 63-61 thriller against App State, and he was kind of bottled up tonight. It was their sophomore running back who rushed for 230-something yards and 3 touchdowns, just carrying the Tar Heels, especially in that second half. And then May did run, actually not throw, but run for the 13-yard score.
For a touchdown.
For a touchdown to win, to give them the game winner.
Yeah, it is. Mac Brown said, "I'm glad we don't have to play them." And that's the end of a 2-for-1, 2 games in Chapel Hill, 1 game in Boone arrangement. Amarian Hampton, by the way, here's the stat.
Amarian Hampton, yeah.
26 carries, 234 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Wow.
Just sick.
So that was another thriller. There were so many good games. How about Biff Poggi and Charlotte going up 14-0 on Maryland before the Terps finally woke up? Now, Maryland did wind up cruising to victory, but it was a very nerve-wracking first half, and Biff Poggi's on NB freaking C. Like, first of all,
cutoff shirt.
How does NBC pay all this money and have to wind up with a Charlotte Maryland game in prime time opposite Alabama, Texas? But yeah, Maryland, they did wake up and ended up winning 38-20. But Biff was there in all his glory. I have faith that the 49ers are going to turn things around.
Well, speaking of another close call or fun thriller by the end, we teased it earlier, but James Madison did end up coming back and beating Virginia.
Yes.
So that was a very painful loss for the Hoos there. And Jeff Hafley avoided maybe becoming Scott Frost in 2023 by not losing to Holy Cross.
So Bob Chesney, who all the Boston College fans would like to be coaching Boston College. Yeah,
exactly. If they could do kind of a bait and switch there for the head coach, that I think they would like that.
So also congratulations to Northwestern, their first win on U.S. soil since October 16th, 2021, when they beat Rutgers. They beat UTEP. UTEP went up 7-0, and then Northwestern rolled to a 38-7 win. And also, congratulations to fellow Lake Mary Ram Colton Boomer, UCF's kicker. He had a 40-yard walk-off to beat Boise State on the blue.
Well, okay. I did not get any eyes on that game tonight. That's interesting. I think Boise was a favorite in that game, weren't they?
It was not a high-scoring affair. Yeah, it was a very tense defensive struggle, and it took that kick at the very end to lift the Knights, but it's probably not the game they plan to play ever. They won 18-16, but it's one of those. I always say, if a team can win games in several different ways, that's the mark of a good team. So maybe UCF can do that. And
here's a result. Here's a result, Andy, that I think I did not. And I will go back. I spend Sunday kind of going back and catching up on some of these, lesser games that we don't get eyes on. You see Cincinnati beat Pat Narduzzi.
Yes, they did.
And the Pitt Panthers.
Emory Jones is playing really well for the Bearcats. Scott Satterfield's doing a good job with them because, we looked at that as Fickle leaves. Satterfield had to get the hell out of Louisville because things were going bad. They were still mad at him for interviewing at South Carolina. He's doing a good job, even though, a lot of Cincinnati's better players went and followed Fickle. But Emory Jones, the guy who was waiting his turn behind Kyle Trask at Florida for Dan Mullen, and then went to Arizona State and is now at Cincinnati. That's one of those, he's still in college, guys, but he's doing very well.
Well, the other guy for Cincinnati that I'm seeing that did really well tonight is Corey Kiner, the former LSU running back. He had a $150 and a tutty. But going into Pitt, I mean,
yeah.
Pat Narduzzi doesn't typically lose those games, and they were up. Cincinnati held on for dear life. They were up 27-7, and then Pitt scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. But certainly a notable result. I mean, that's kind of a lesser game in all this. But
you mentioned this earlier, but let's give it a second or two. Rice beats Houston in double overtime. Now that game was actually Rice hanging on for dear life to win. They built a pretty big lead and then hung on. Dana Holgerson was the popular name on all the hot seat lists before the season, along with, trying to think who are the other. Neil Brown would be the other big one. Jeff Hafley. And Holgerson is probably the one in the Big 12 that everyone's assuming, other than Neil Brown, will get fired. But I thought after they beat UTSA last week, I'm like, well, maybe not. Maybe they're going to be better than we thought, and he's going to be able to turn things around. The reason we're saying this, by the way, isn't so much that we think he's done a bad job. Houston doesn't play around. Like, remember when they fired Tony Levine after he won 8 games?
Well,
that man started running Chick-fil-A's. He didn't even go back to college football.
What was it? Their AD, or was it the Rockets owner, their big booster?
It was like, Tillman. It's Tillman Fertitta.
Tillman Fertitta, who was like, we fire coaches if they don't win 9 games.
Yeah. Yep. And Tillman feels the same way, and he feels like he's invested a lot, and that it cost them a lot to get to the Big 12, and they want to win in the Big 12. So they're going to have to turn around really quickly, or he may do something impulsive again. So, but that was one of those scores that kept coming across. And there's so many huge things going on. It's hard to watch all of it, but you kept looking at it going, what? And then finally I got a chance to watch the overtime, the 2 overtimes. But yeah, losing to Rice is not a good look at this point.
And never want to play with your food.
It only gets harder for Houston in the first year in the Big 12. So we'll see how that goes. We don't need to do too deep a hot seat discussion here after week 2, but you know how things are going. They go faster and faster these days. So we might only be a few weeks away from our first firing, depending on how things go in various places. But Jesse, it's been a pleasure. What a day.
It delivered.
That's right. Texas is, I'm not going to say it.
Fowler wouldn't either.
Texas is playing very well and could continue to play very well. How's that?
And looks like a college football playoff team if they continue to play very well.
That's right. We need to see it against the teams that you're supposed to beat, not just the big games against Alabama that everybody's watching, but you play like that, you're going to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. That's going to happen. So very excited to see what happens next, and college football delivered again. Thanks so much for listening. If you like this show, we're doing this Sunday through Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time on the On3 YouTube channel. And also, this show gets put into podcast form on all the major podcast platforms. So if you don't want to watch, or you got to drive around in the car and do some stuff, you can listen to us there. Talk to you soon.